All right, let's look and see what happens if we actually call this render more than once. Okay, so what I want to do is let's put this code inside a function. So let's call, let's say, function re-render, or we'll just call it render. Okay. So this function render, I'm going to say we're going to want to call it every so often. So we're going to want to, let's say, call it when we first start, and then we're going to set an interval. We'll go ahead and call it. So we pass in a callback, and we pass in how often we want to call it. So let's just put it every 5,000 milliseconds. Okay, so every 5 seconds. Let's try this. So what we see is this was loaded at 3:37:38, and then I'd assume 5 seconds later it'll display, so 43. Yes, so it's updating every 5 seconds. Okay. This is a little more like how regular React programming is going to look, in the sense that we are going to be doing a bunch of creation of JSX. Okay. However, we don't normally call React DOM render more than once per program. We normally just call it once, and then from there on there's some other rendering that takes place. Let's look a little bit at what is happening if we actually look at this here. We see this actually turns color, which shows that it's changing. So what is important to note is it's not changing the entire DOM. Okay. Let's look at an alternate way to do this rendering. Okay, so I am going to go ahead and do something like this, something like if false, do this. And the reason I am actually putting in an if false instead of like commenting it out is because the JavaScript compiler is very strict, and it will complain because there was no use of React DOM, but I'm importing it. So I want to be able to leave my imports alone. So we're going to go ahead and do something else. And what we're going to do is we're going to do the same document.getElement by ID. And we're getting the root element, that is the one whose ID is equal to root. Inner HTML property. And we can set the inner HTML to, let's go ahead and set it to this. We can't, so this inner HTML is basically just the raw interface to the DOM. And so it doesn't know anything about JSX. So I'm going to go ahead and use these backticks, and so this can be, this was load this, let's say it was updated at this time. So we're going to add in a div around it. I'll show you why in just a second. So we have this inner div now, and what I want you to notice is as we change the time, it is actually replacing this entire div. Okay, so this is turning purple, and so the entire div is changing. So it's replacing not only this text, but also the entire div. When we are using React, here's what happens. Let me reformat this. So let's run this again and just look. Oh, made a syntax error. Yes. All right, so as we look at what's purple here, notice we've got some included divs and stuff like that, but the only thing that's changing is this text here. Okay, it's not changing all of the unchanging elements. How does that work? Well, how that works is when we call render on a particular element from the DOM, it doesn't just convert this all to DOM elements, remove what was in this root element, and then replace the contents. Okay? The reason for that is that would be quite slow. So it's not uncommon when we're using React to have a page with thousands of different HTML elements in the JSX. If only one changes, the goal is just go update that one in the DOM, because changing all of them would be quite expensive. So what happens is it basically saves this from the last render, and then when we call render again, it takes the new render and it basically does a diff, and it says what has changed, right? The structure of it may all be the same, in which case that's fine, and the content may be the same, but if there's things that are different, and then figures out what are the minimal changes I can make to the DOM to cause it to update from the old value to the new value. Okay? And in this case, when we go from old to new, right, this is one 5-second interval, looks like this, with a particular date. When we call it again with a second 5-second interval, it's going to look exactly the same. The only difference will be this date. So that's what it'll change. So then React is going to go look and say, okay, all these other DOM elements can remain the same because they haven't changed. I just need to go into this particular div and change this particular text. And that's why that's showing up purple. Okay. So that is a key optimization of React. So when we're using React, we never think, how do I need to change the DOM elements to reflect the change I need to make? Instead, you just say, how do I generate the page I want? And once I've generated the page I want, it's up to React to apply the necessary modifications to the DOM to end up with the result that we asked for.